The grand civilization of ancient Egypt thrived, a testament to human ingenuity and devotion, its colossal monuments soaring towards the heavens, mirroring the unwavering faith of its people. The Nile, artery of life, flowed with a timeless rhythm, nurturing fertile lands and sustaining a complex society built on order, tradition, and reverence for the divine. Yet, beneath this veneer of eternal serenity, a silent dread began to unfurl its tendrils, whispering through the sun-baked streets and echoing within the hallowed halls of temples. Among those who served this enduring empire was Amun, a young scribe whose sharp intellect was matched only by his unwavering loyalty to the Pharaoh and the ancient traditions he meticulously documented. His days were spent poring over papyrus scrolls, his mind a repository of history, law, and prophecy, each stroke of his reed pen a prayer to the continuity of their sacred ways. He believed implicitly in the established order, in the wisdom passed down through generations, a belief that anchored him firmly to the security of the known. In stark contrast stood Nefret, a priestess whose intelligence was as keen as Amun's, but whose spirit burned with a fiercely independent flame. While she honored the gods and performed her duties with grace, her perceptive eyes often saw beyond the dogma, questioning the rigidity of ancient doctrines and seeking deeper truths. She possessed an innate curiosity, a desire to understand the why behind the what, which sometimes chafed against the strictures of her sacred calling. Their world, however, was about to be irrevocably shaken by a looming threat, the shadow Blight. Initially, it manifested as a creeping malaise, a fever that dimmed the brightest eyes, a cough that racked the strongest bodies. It spread insidiously, indistinguishable from the common ailments of the season, until its victims began to display grotesque, shadowy marks upon their skin, their breaths growing shallow, their lives flickering out with chilling swiftness. Panic, a foreign emotion in their ordered society, began to ripple through the populace. It was this very Blight that, despite their differing philosophies, drew Amun and Nefret together. The Pharaoh, concerned by the escalating deaths, tasked his most trusted scholars and priests with understanding and combating the plague. Amun with his meticulous record-keeping, and Nefret with her profound understanding of ancient remedies and spiritual lore, found themselves working side by side. A shared sense of duty, a mutual concern for their people, bridged the chasm of their intellectual disparities. They were two sides of the same coin, each essential to the other in this burgeoning crisis. As they delved deeper, examining the bodies, consulting ancient texts, and interviewing the afflicted, subtle inconsistencies began to emerge. The plague's patterns defied natural explanation. There were whispers, too, from the lower echelons of the priesthood, hushed tones of unease, hints of a hidden conspiracy within the high ranks, suggesting that not all was as it seemed. Nefret, ever the skeptic, found these whispers disturbing, while Amun, initially dismissive, found himself unable to ignore the growing pile of anomalies. Their combined efforts led them to a restricted section of the Grand Library, a place rarely accessed, where scrolls spoke of ancient, forgotten curses and forbidden knowledge. There, amidst the crumbling papyri, they made a chilling first discovery. An ancient text, its hieroglyphs faded but still legible, detailing a ritual that spoke of sickness not as an affliction, but as a tool. The document, clearly generations old, suggested the plague was not natural, but a deliberate act. A cold dread seeped into Amun's heart. As he traced the intricate symbols on the forbidden text, his finger brushed against a small, almost imperceptible marking, a coded symbol etched into the papyrus's brittle surface. His eyes widened, his breath catching in his throat. It was identical, undeniably identical, to a strange, almost ritualistic mark he had observed just days ago on the wrist of a recent plague victim. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The realization hit Amun with the force of a desert sandstorm, chilling him to the bone. This wasn't merely a plague, it was a weapon, wielded by an unseen hand. Nefret, observing the fear in his eyes, understood the gravity of his discovery without a single word being exchanged. Their shared sense of duty now transformed into a dangerous, secret investigation, one that would force them to navigate the treacherous currents of ancient Egyptian politics and faith. They knew their inquiries would be met with resistance, perhaps even hostility, from the very authorities they sought to protect. Their initial suspicions quickly turned towards High Priest Theron, a figure of immense power and reverence within the temple hierarchy. Theron's pronouncements often carried the weight of divine decree, his counsel sought by the Pharaoh himself. Yet, a subtle shift had occurred in his demeanor since the shadow blight began its relentless spread. A new, unsettling fervor seemed to possess him, a quiet intensity that belied his usual calm. Amun, who had always looked to Theron as a mentor, felt a disquieting unease stir within him, a nascent doubt gnawing at his ingrained loyalty. For Nefret, however, the suspicion of Theron carried a far more personal sting. Years ago, a similar, though less virulent illness had swept through her village, claiming many lives, including her parents and younger sister. The memory of their suffering, the helplessness she felt as a child, fueled her resolve. She had dedicated her life to understanding such ailments, a path that now converged chillingly with the present crisis. This wasn't just about the kingdom. It was about avenging a past tragedy, about preventing another family from enduring the same unbearable loss. The shadow blight, she now realized, might be a perfected version of the very sickness that had shattered her world. The tension between Amun's unwavering loyalty to the Pharaoh and Nefret's relentless pursuit of truth at any cost became a constant, unspoken undercurrent in their clandestine work. Amun believed in due process, in gathering irrefutable evidence before accusing a figure as powerful as Theron. Nefret, driven by her personal demons and a more pragmatic understanding of power dynamics, urged haste, fearing that every moment wasted meant more lives lost. She saw the corruption festering, while Amun still clung to the hope of an honorable explanation. Their investigation led them to disturbing conclusions. Carefully analyzing patterns of the Blight's spread, they noticed an uncanny correlation with the movements of certain temple emissaries, particularly those connected to Theron. There were specific areas, seemingly random, where the plague seemed to erupt with unnatural ferocity, then recede, only to reappear elsewhere. This wasn't the chaotic, unpredictable march of a natural disease. It was deliberate, almost strategic. They uncovered evidence suggesting the plague was being actively, meticulously disseminated, a chilling realization that solidified their belief in a human hand behind the devastation. One moonless night, their pursuit of answers led them deep into the restricted archives beneath the main temple. Dust motes danced in the flickering lamplight as they meticulously deciphered ancient hieroglyphs, seeking further confirmation of their terrifying hypothesis. The air was thick with the scent of aged papyrus and forgotten secrets. They were so engrossed in their work, tracing the cryptic symbols of a long-lost ritual, that the soft scuff of sandals on stone sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through them. A temple guard on his nightly rounds was approaching. Amun and Nefret froze, their hearts pounding in unison, narrowly averting discovery by slipping behind a towering shelf of scrolls, holding their breaths as the footsteps passed by, their escape a matter of mere seconds. The text they were deciphering that night, the forbidden knowledge they risked everything for, detailed a ritual of immense, unspeakable power. It wasn't just about sickness. It spoke of a dark invocation, a grand exchange. It promised unimaginable influence, divine authority, but at a horrifying price. Mass sacrifice, not through direct slaughter, but through a slow, agonizing blight that would consume the land, draining its vitality, its very lifeblood, to empower the caster. As the final, chilling implications of the ancient script unfurled before them, a name echoed in their minds, stark and undeniable. Theron. The High Priest, the revered mentor, was not merely complicit, he was the mastermind. His ambition, it seemed, knew no bounds, and his endgame was terrifyingly clear: to usurp the Pharaoh, to seize ultimate power, using the very plague that now ravaged their beloved Egypt as his instrument. The cliffhanger of their investigation was not an unanswered question, but a terrifying certainty. The Pharaoh's once vibrant complexion had faded to an ashen gray, his robust frame now alarmingly frail. Each labored breath he took seemed to echo the kingdom's dwindling hope, a stark counterpoint to Theron's increasingly confident posture. The High Priest moved through the palace with a chilling new authority, his pronouncements now carrying an almost absolute weight, his influence expanding like a dark shadow over the ailing ruler. Amun watched, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach, as the man he had once revered systematically dismantled the very foundations of his faith. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, gnawing at his soul, forcing him to question every truth he had ever held dear about honor, duty, and the sacred hierarchy. How could a mentor, a spiritual guide, harbor such insidious ambition? Nefret, her eyes burning with a fierce urgency, pushed for immediate action. The Pharaoh's weakening state was a ticking clock, each moment of inaction a step closer to Theron's triumph. But Amun, still reeling from the shock of Theron's treachery, insisted on irrefutable proof, something concrete that would shatter the High Priest's carefully constructed facade of piety. He knew that merely accusing Theron, without undeniable evidence, would be tantamount to suicide, and would only serve to solidify Theron's power further. They needed a weapon of truth, forged from ancient knowledge, to pierce through the veil of deception. Their desperate search led them away from the bustling city, into the quiet, sun-baked solitude of the desert fringes, to a secluded dwelling rumored to house an exiled elder. She was a former priestess, dismissed years ago for her unconventional interpretations of ancient texts, her wisdom now considered heresy by the ruling clergy. Her name was whispered only in hushed tones, her knowledge a dangerous relic of a forgotten past. They found her in a small, sun-drenched courtyard. Her eyes, though clouded with age, held a sharp, knowing glint. The elder listened patiently, her gaze unwavering as Amun and Nefret recounted their terrifying discoveries. When they spoke of the ritual, her expression darkened, a profound sadness settling upon her features. She confirmed their fears, and then deepened them. The ritual, she explained, was not merely for immense power, it was far more sinister. It promised not just temporary authority, but eternal life for the caster, a grotesque immortality fueled by the life force of the very land and its people. The shadow blight was not simply a means to an end. It was the mechanism by which the kingdom's vitality would be siphoned, slowly, agonizingly, into Theron, leaving behind a barren wasteland and a population of lifeless husks. The thought sent a shiver down Amun's spine. Theron sought to become a god, not through divine right, but through vampiric consumption of his own people. As they absorbed this horrifying revelation, a sudden commotion erupted outside the elder's humble dwelling. The distant shouts and the rhythmic thud of marching feet sent a cold wave of alarm through them. Theron's guards. He had anticipated their move, or perhaps simply cast a wide net. Danger, once an abstract concept, was now a tangible, immediate threat. The elder, her face etched with grim determination, pointed towards a hidden passage beneath a loose flagstone. "Go! The catacombs will offer a path, but be swift," she urged, her voice low and urgent. They plunged into the darkness, the ancient stones cool and damp against their skin. The labyrinthine temple catacombs stretched before them, a bewildering maze of narrow passages, echoing chambers, and forgotten crypts. The air was thick with the scent of dust and decay, each turn a gamble, each shadow a potential trap. They could hear the shouts of Theron's guards above them, their voices muffled but drawing closer, their torches casting dancing, menacing flickers through cracks in the ceiling. Adrenaline surged through Amun and Nefret as they navigated the oppressive darkness, their hands brushing against cold, ancient carvings, their footsteps hushed, their breath ragged. Just as they thought they might find a moment's respite in a larger, central chamber, voices drifted down from an opening high above. It was Theron, his voice resonating with chilling triumph, accompanied by the clatter of weapons and the hushed tones of his most loyal enforcers. "The Pharaoh weakens with each passing hour," Theron declared, his tone devoid of any sympathy. "The final phase of the ritual must commence at dawn. His demise will be the dawn of my true reign." The words hung in the air, a death knell for the Pharaoh, a terrifying confirmation of Theron's ultimate plan. Amun and Nefret exchanged a look of profound horror. They were out of time. The chilling pronouncement from Theron, echoing down into the catacombs, galvanized Amun and Nefret. There was no more time for hesitation, no more room for doubt. The pharaoh's life, and indeed the very soul of Egypt, hung by a thread, and they were the only ones who could sever Theron's dark ambition. Their escape from the catacombs was a desperate scramble, propelled by the urgency of the High Priest's words. They emerged into the pre-dawn stillness, their minds racing, formulating a plan born of necessity and sheer terror. Their first task was to find allies, individuals whose loyalty to the pharaoh outweighed any fear of Theron. Their search led them to Khepri, a seasoned palace guard, whose face usually bore the placid mask of duty, but now was etched with a quiet, seething resentment. Khepri had witnessed Theron's insidious rise, the subtle manipulations, the gradual erosion of the pharaoh's authority, and the unmistakable stench of corruption that now permeated the temple. He was a man of few words, but his eyes held a steely resolve when Amun and Nefret laid bare Theron's treachery. He understood the stakes immediately and pledged his unwavering support, his disillusionment with the High Priest far outweighing any personal risk. They also sought out those most directly afflicted by the shadow blight, the commoners whose families had been ravaged, their livelihoods destroyed. In the city's poorer districts, where the plague's grip was tightest, they found not despair, but a simmering anger, a desperate longing for justice. A small but determined group, led by a woman named Imhotep, whose children had fallen victim to the blight, listened intently. Their faces, gaunt and weary, hardened with resolve, as Nefret explained how their suffering was not a divine curse, but the calculated cruelty of a man bent on dominion. They might be powerless individually, but together, they were a force, their collective grief a potent weapon against oppression. For Amun, this was a profound, agonizing turning point. His entire life had been defined by reverence for the priesthood, by an unshakable faith in the ancient institutions that governed their world. To now actively conspire against the High Priest, to dismantle the very hierarchy he had sworn to uphold, was an act of profound betrayal in his own mind. Yet, as he looked at the faces of the suffering commoners, at Khepri's grim determination, and especially at Nefret's unwavering conviction, he knew there was no other path. His loyalty to the pharaoh, his love for his people now demanded a greater, more painful sacrifice, the shedding of his lifelong illusions. He had to choose between a corrupted tradition and the salvation of his homeland. The choice, though difficult, was clear. Nefret, too, faced her own demons. As she recounted the details of Theron's ritual to the commoners, a chilling realization washed over her. The plague that had claimed her family years ago, the less severe but equally insidious illness that had ravaged her village, was not a natural disaster. It was an early attempt, a crude, perhaps even experimental, precursor to the shadow blight, a trial run by Theron as he perfected his dark art. The insidious nature of his ambition stretched back further than she had ever imagined, twisting her personal tragedy into a calculated act of malice. Her grief transformed into a cold, burning resolve. Their plan solidified. They needed an artifact, something potent enough to disrupt Theron's ritual. The elder had spoken of a sacred amulet, hidden within Theron's private chambers, a relic said to amplify or, crucially, nullify ancient magic. Retrieving it would be a perilous mission, demanding stealth and cunning. Under the cover of deepening shadows, Khepri, with his intimate knowledge of the palace's secret passages, guided Amun and Nefret towards Theron's private sanctuary. The chambers were opulent, a stark contrast to the suffering outside, filled with forbidden texts and strange glowing talismans. As Amun reached for a small, intricately carved amulet resting on a pedestal, a hulking figure emerged from the shadows, Theron's most loyal enforcer, a man known only as Khonsu, his eyes burning with fanaticism. A tense confrontation ensued, a silent battle of wills and strength. Khepri, anticipating such a trap, burst in, creating a diversion that allowed Amun and Nefret a narrow, desperate escape, the amulet clutched tightly in Amun's hand. As they fled, the amulet pulsed with a faint, warm light. It was real. It was their only hope. But their momentary triumph was short-lived. A low, resonant hum began to emanate from the direction of the sacred chamber, growing steadily louder, accompanied by a faint, sickly green glow. The ritual. It had already begun. The Pharaoh, they knew, was weakening rapidly, his life force slowly draining away, feeding Theron's monstrous ambition. The air in the sacred chamber crackled with an ominous energy, a tangible manifestation of the dark magic Theron was weaving. The low, resonant hum they had heard earlier had intensified into a throbbing pulse that vibrated through the very stones of the temple, a sinister heartbeat echoing the Pharaoh's rapidly fading life. Theron, robed in black, stood before an altar, his arms raised, his voice a guttural chant that twisted ancient words into profane incantations. Before him, the Pharaoh lay prone, his body racked with tremors, his breath shallow, his once regal features contorted in a silent struggle against the unseen forces draining his vitality. Amun and Nefret, flanked by the grim-faced Khepri and the determined commoners, burst into the hallowed space. The sudden intrusion shattered the ritual's hypnotic rhythm, momentarily startling Theron and his remaining loyal guards. Chaos erupted. Theron's guards, fewer in number than anticipated, but fanatically devoted, immediately moved to intercept the intruders, their bronze weapons glinting in the eerie green light emanating from the altar. Khepri, a seasoned warrior, met their charge with practiced efficiency, his shield deflecting blows, his sword a blur of motion. The commoners, fueled by grief and righteous fury, surged forward, their makeshift weapons, farming tools, sturdy staffs, surprisingly effective against the unprepared guards. Amun, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, pushed past the melee, his eyes fixed on Theron. He had once revered this man, had seen him as a beacon of wisdom and piety. Now, only disgust and a searing sense of betrayal remained. "Theron!" Amun's voice, usually calm and measured, cracked with raw emotion, cutting through the din of battle. "You betray the Pharaoh, your vows, and the very gods you claim to serve. This is sacrilege." Theron, his face contorted in a mask of malicious glee, merely sneered, his eyes burning with an unholy light, never leaving the weakened Pharaoh. "Sacrilege? No, young Amun, this is evolution. The gods are weak, their traditions shackles. I offer a new path, a path to true power, eternal life. The Pharaoh's demise is but a necessary sacrifice for my ascension, for Egypt's true glory." His words dripped with a chilling arrogance, a testament to the depths of his delusion. He intensified his chant, the green light around the altar flaring brighter, causing the Pharaoh to convulse violently. Nefret, ignoring the skirmish around her, moved with purpose towards the altar. The sacred amulet, clutched in her hand, pulsed with a gentle, warm light, a stark contrast to the malevolent glow of Theron's magic. She understood the intricate dance of ancient energies, the delicate balance Theron sought to disrupt. Her mind raced, recalling the Elder's words, the forgotten rituals, the counterspells designed to unravel such dark enchantments. With a fierce cry, she raised the amulet, focusing her will, channeling her innate connection to the ancient forces of life and balance. A wave of pure, white energy erupted from the amulet, clashing violently with the sickly green aura surrounding Theron. The chamber groaned, caught in the throes of a magical maelstrom. The air grew heavy, thick with opposing energies, and sparks of raw power flew through the space, making the very stones tremble. Theron shrieked, his ritual momentarily faltering under the assault, his carefully constructed spell beginning to unravel. He turned his fury on Nefret, his eyes burning with venomous hatred, but Amun, seeing his opening, charged. With a desperate lunge, Amun tackled Theron, disrupting his concentration, breaking the flow of his dark incantations. The amulet in Nefret's hand flared again, surging with renewed power. The clash of destinies had reached its apex, a cataclysmic collision of light and shadow, tradition and treachery. The very foundations of the sacred chamber seemed to buckle under the strain, as Amun and Nefret together channeled every ounce of their will and courage to overcome the monstrous power of High Priest Theron. The cost, they knew, would be immense. The chaotic magical energy that had engulfed the sacred chamber slowly dissipated, leaving behind a profound stillness, heavy with the dust of shattered stone and spent power. Theron lay motionless amidst the debris, his body twisted, his dark magic unraveling like a frayed tapestry. The unholy light in his eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a vacant stare, the immense power he had coveted now consuming him utterly. The shadow Blight, its source severed, began its slow retreat from the land, the air in the chamber feeling marginally lighter, less oppressive. The Pharaoh, though saved from the brink of death, remained gravely ill, his breath still shallow, his form frail. Yet a flicker of life, a faint pulse, returned to his ravaged body, a testament to Nefret's intervention. Khepri and the commoners, exhausted but victorious, stood amidst the wreckage, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and sorrow. The kingdom, however, would grapple with the profound betrayal and the near catastrophe for years to come. The sanctity of the priesthood, the trust in its leaders, had been irrevocably shaken. Amun and Nefret, though physically drained, felt an immense weight lift from their shoulders. They had faced down the darkest treachery, had stared into the abyss of ambition, and had emerged, scarred but unbroken. They were hailed as heroes, their names whispered with reverence throughout the recovering land, but their lives were forever changed. The naive scribe and the questioning priestess had been forged in the crucible of this conflict, emerging as figures of unwavering resolve. For Amun, the path ahead was clear, though arduous. The betrayal of Theron, once his revered mentor, had shattered his blind faith in tradition, forcing him to confront the corruption that could fester even within the most sacred institutions. He dedicated himself to rebuilding trust, to reforming the priesthood from within, ensuring that its teachings would once again serve the people and the true gods, not the ambitions of a few. He envisioned a priesthood grounded in wisdom and empathy, not rigid dogma, a guiding light for a nation traumatized by darkness. It was a daunting task, but Amun, no longer the naive youth, possessed the conviction and courage to undertake it. Nefret, too, found a profound sense of peace. The specter of her family's fate, the agonizing question of their suffering, had finally been answered, their memory avenged. The knowledge that Theron's early failed attempts had caused their demise brought a bitter closure, yet it also fueled her renewed dedication. She devoted herself to healing the land and its people, her knowledge of ancient lore and herbal remedies now freely shared, bringing solace to those who had suffered under the shadow Blight. She worked tirelessly, tending to the sick, comforting the grieving, her presence a calming balm in the storm's aftermath. A new era for Egypt slowly dawned, not one of blind obedience to ancient decrees, but one guided by the hard-won wisdom of experience and the unwavering pursuit of truth. The scars of Theron's treachery would remain, a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, but they would also serve as a foundation for a stronger, more resilient society. The Pharaoh, slowly recovering, relied heavily on Amun's counsel, recognizing the scribe's profound transformation and unwavering loyalty. Amun and Nefret often found themselves walking together along the Nile, discussing the future, their conversations filled with a quiet understanding that transcended mere words. Their bond, forged in the fires of adversity, had grown into an unbreakable connection, a shared destiny that would continue to shape the destiny of Egypt. They looked towards a hopeful future, knowing that while challenges would undoubtedly arise, they would face them together, their combined strength a testament to the enduring power of truth, courage, and the unwavering spirit of a people reborn.